Hello, everybody. Welcome back to We've All Done It. This is Kimberly Benoit, your hostess with the mostest, and I have a co-pilot today that I am really thrilled to have, actually. We've been orbiting each other's universes for a while, and I think this is one of the first times we're actually like sitting and actually doing something together, which is super cool. So today we have Mr. Jimmy Burroughes. I'm going to let him do a little intro on himself, but I just want to say I am really excited. I love our conversations every time we have them, and I'm really excited we're finally recording one of them so everyone else can see why you're so brilliant.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I wasn't expecting. I mean, hostess with the mostest is where I was. My ears perked up, so I'm excited for today.
So I know your background. I could read a bio, but I feel like people always do a much better job of what they want to share about themselves. So tell everybody a little bit about your background because it is really unique, and I think it's just unique from most people that are in our space.
Well, thank you. I suppose to put everything into context, I live in Mexico, which is a little bit of a change. I am aspiring to be a good father, a good husband to my beautiful daughter and wonderful wife. And in between those moments, I run a leadership consultancy, which focuses predominantly on manager of managers and how to help them remove all the friction that's in the system that's stopping them being high performers. Uh, I picked up the skills to do that through a series of kind of career chapters, I suppose you would say. Initially started off as an army officer in, in Gulf War II over in Iraq, had a few spells in Iraq, and then a couple of trips overseas to Australia and Afghanistan to instruct in various topics. But all of the kind of stuff that led through my military career was all about leadership development and creating high performing teams. I then transitioned out of the military in the early 2000s and moved into an HR career, which was again predominantly focused on learning and development, leadership development, and how do you create some stuff that really busy leaders and managers can absorb quickly, apply today, and isn't just what I call HR noise or HR fluff, but actually is kind of give me something that works because I'm really busy and I've got a full head of things to try and make money for this business or try and hit my targets or whatever it is. And I'm also getting really frustrated by all the other things in the business that are slowing me down. So can you help me with those as well? And so my HR career was built around designing and creating programs that allowed that before I about 8 years ago, 8, 9 years ago now, stepped out on my own and have been doing that for the last few years, creating programs for some really incredible businesses globally, filled with amazing people who it's a privilege to work with, to be honest. But just getting the opportunity to partner up with those businesses and share a little bit about what I've learned along the way, mostly the hard way. You know, I'm not particularly bright, so I tend to run face first into walls and learn that way. And then sharing some of those stories and lessons about my nose implosion with others to try and stop them making the same mistakes, essentially.
Well, I mean, that's the best teacher, right? Is making the mistakes. And that's the whole premise of why I do what I do, is because I've made some stupid mistakes. I've watched people that I respect and admire also make mistakes and realize, you know what, that's just part of being human. We're
We've all done
going to
it, right?
screw up at some point in time. But it's how you recover and what you do with it that matters. But
Yeah.
one of the things I was excited to talk about, because you and I have had some conversations offline about this, and why I wanted to have this conversation today on the show, was to really start talking about how leadership development, you kind of talked about this a little bit, about what is shifting in the environment with leaders today. And the fact that the traditional leadership development training, that some of the models that I know I did early in my career just don't seem to be fitting the bill and don't seem to
Yeah.
be getting it done per se. You know, leaders go in, they take these trainings, they do, whether they're half days, whole days, webinars, all these things, and then they walk away, but nothing fundamentally shifts. So
Not
there's
really,
something
no.
broken in that model. And so I wanted to talk with you about that because I know you have a lot of passion about this as well. So in that space, so we'll start with that question. What do you think traditional leadership development gets wrong?
Um, I think it's worth probably caveating anything that I say with there is a broad spectrum of leadership development happening from the highly effective to the highly ineffective.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that curve is more towards the ineffective end of the curve in the majority of cases. There are some incredible businesses out there doing some really forward-thinking stuff that is making a massive difference, and I applaud them and I celebrate them, and I want to get to know what they're doing and understand and replicate it. What we see in the majority of cases, unfortunately, though, is a combination of factors that are getting in the way of the success of the leadership investment that's happening. And if we put this into context, we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars a year are spent on leadership development globally. I think in America alone, it's about $160 billion. So we're talking a significant investment of cash, and less than 15% of programs that are delivered and the interventions that are on offer in organizations have a positive impact, according to the research that is done with various different individuals and various different firms. So what we're saying is essentially, you go and do 100 hours of development, 4 days of development in a year, and maybe you use 10 to 15 hours on a new style of behavior or a new skill. And I think there's some reasons that we can dig into. I think there's 5 core reasons. The first one is a really interesting one, actually. The majority of leadership development is carried out either in-house by HR teams, or by consultants who have been co-opted or contracted by those HR teams. And those consultants are often former internal HR people who've gone out on their own and done something. Unfortunately, most of HR doesn't have the opportunity to lead at scale in the way that an operational leader would. If you're an HR manager in a medium-sized business, maybe you've got 5 to 10 people working for you. If you're a GM HR, maybe you've got 20 to 30 people working for you. So the difference between managing a group of 30 people and managing 3,000 people is significant. Now, even 300 people is significant. And so a lot of the people who are delivering these leadership programs, they've never had the experience of leading at scale. They've never understood what real leadership in a really tough P&L environment where KPIs are the be all and end all of that business. They haven't been exposed to that stuff. And it's not their fault. It's the career trajectory that they've been on. But what we end up teaching then tends to be management skills to leaders, because that's what HR managers understand. They understand how to manage people and they understand management. So they teach things like prioritization and tough conversations and decision making and things like that. And these are management skills. They're very important, but they're not leadership. And so our leaders are underprepared in the global marketplace to lead through some of the really challenging circumstances that we're now seeing and are emerging more and more frequently. Which kind of brings me to my second one, which is the idea of the massive amount of ambiguity that leaders are facing is like a cognitive overload. Somebody once said to me, our generation, so I'm mid-40s, manages on average 4 times the amount of data in one day that our parents managed in a month. So my mum worked in an office, and you can imagine the story. The workload that she had, a letter would arrive from a client that she was working with. It would go into the post room, it would be sorted 24 hours, and then the next morning it would be delivered onto her desk. And she would open the letter, she would read it, she'd think about it for 24 hours. She would draft a reply, which was typed up and then sent to the post room, and it was sent out. 3 to 5 days later, it would reach the client, and the cycle would start again. Now we do that in about 30 seconds. We read an email, we respond, and then 30 seconds later, a response comes back.
Well, you're assuming it's an email. It might be a text.
Well, it could be a text, could be a WhatsApp, could be a Slack, could be a Trello, could be an Asana. I mean, the multi-channel nature of the deluge of stuff we're getting just creates this massive cognitive overload. And to put it into context, there is a cost to cognitive overload, and the cost of cognitive switching can be up to 23 minutes per switch. So think of yourself being in the zone. Something happens, something bothers you, a notification goes off, and it's 23 minutes before you can get back into the zone again. And that stacks up over the course of a day, because you're forcing then, I haven't got 23 minutes to wait, I've got to force it to get back into the zone, which takes another toll. And that creates a massive amount of cognitive overload that we don't teach people to deal with in leadership programs. They're just expected to manage through that and get on with it whilst going on a leadership program. And the worst example of it is we take people out of the office for a 4-day leadership program, And all the while, they're freaking out about the number of meetings they've got when they get back, the number of emails that are coming into their inbox while they're in the meeting, while they're in the training, and basically crisis managing whilst trying to absorb leadership information. It just doesn't work. So that's a challenge. The third one, I think, is something that we're all guilty of, is we try and pack too much content into leadership programs. From my perspective, what I've learned over the last 8-10 years is actually having a very open, light agenda, which allows lots of space for conversation, reflection, storytelling, examples, metaphors, and people to go for walks in the trees. And it sounds a bit woo, but actually the biggest challenge that most leaders have is because they've got all this stuff going on, is they never have any time to stop and think. And one of the things we teach in our Amplify program is that on day one is the benefits of stopping and thinking and making time for stopping and thinking. So we try and demonstrate that during the course of the program at multiple instances where we just say, take 5 minutes and notice what you notice, or go with a notebook and pen and write down the 3 most important things for you to be working on next week. Just take 5 minutes out. And it's those little momentary pauses that we practice in the course of the program versus bombarding with content. The other thing that I think that aligns with this is you go on a leadership course and it's like drinking champagne from a fire hose. It's just coming at you slide after slide after slide after slide, and you're frantically filling in a workbook or taking notes or whatever it is. And you get back to work and there's very little support to actually put it into place because you haven't practiced any of those things. You were just trying to keep up with the lecturer who was spilling golden wisdom at you. But you haven't got the headspace to try and work through it and reflect on it because you've got meetings and emails to catch up on. So all these great intentions that you came back to work with never actually get put into practice, and there's no accountability, support, and implementation practice that helps that transition from theory into real work. So a lot of the stuff we do is designed to, how can we get you doing this while you're in the program with us? So you do it today and you've already had a good go at it. And we also war game out, how do we make sure this happens when you get back? How do we make sure we've created some space for you? How do we get rid of some meetings? How do we allow you to make some reflection time, whatever it might be that the idea is here? But it's about reduce the content, increase the practice. Whereas most programs are increase the content, pack more in, and let them practice it when they get back. And that doesn't work, we know. The fourth one, and I'll be there. The fourth reason I think this doesn't go well is we tend to focus on what HR thinks is important to teach people versus the stuff that leaders are really challenged by. So, we'll teach prioritization or we'll teach delegation, and there's two barriers here. Number one, nobody's going to do prioritization because everybody thinks they're good at prioritizing. So even if you're teaching a person how to prioritize with an urgent important matrix or whatever you want to call it, then if they think they're good at prioritizing, they're still going to stick with their own way of doing it. So it's very belief based. So we have to tackle the beliefs first, not the behaviors. And so a lot of our work goes into shifting the people's mindsets around their role as a leader and what they bring to the party and where they add value and how to move prioritization to a different space. Equally, the challenge here is not, I don't know how to prioritize. The challenge here, the friction this leader is facing is, I don't spend my time and energy because everything seems urgent and important right now. Or I don't really understand this trust thing. Like, I know if I trust you or if I don't, but I don't know how to build trust in a methodical way. Or I'm not going to have a tough conversation using your crucial conversations framework because every time I have a tough conversation, that person leaves and I'm left with more work. So I'm just going to suck it up for now. And so you've got all these belief barriers that are getting in the way of them changing, but you've also got real world problems that they're dealing with that most leadership programs don't teach. They teach very theoretical, very conceptual best practices without dealing with the barriers of why people aren't actually doing those in the first place. So we go there. We go, well, why aren't you prioritizing? Why aren't you delegating? Why aren't you building psychological safety in your team? Well, let's talk about that and how we move you to get to a different place. That's 4. And then the final one is because a lot of HR people haven't let it scale, because they're delivering programs that don't make a difference, because they're not experienced in what it is to be an operational leader, the operational leaders that go on those programs don't really feel like this is commercially credible. And it's nice, like it's cool, it's good, great to go on a leadership program and have a bit of a chin wag, but they don't really get my problems. They don't really understand the commercial reality of my business. They don't know how my business makes money. They're just selling leadership to me. And I'm really busy. So I'll do it because I have to, but it's not commercially credible. It doesn't talk about bottom line performance. It doesn't talk about how this is going to affect my recruitment process, my recruitment budget. It doesn't talk about how this is going to affect my engagement stats that I measured on and how I can actually move the dial. So the lack of commercial credibility from the leadership programs themselves and during the leadership programs, which means they don't really become sticky for the leader's psyche to want to absorb and change their own behaviors. And that's probably a very long-winded answer to what you asked.
No, so but I do want to go back and talk about pieces of it because I think
Yeah.
your answer, I think all pillars of what you said are absolutely spot on accurate. And I often think so I'll start with the first one. When you talked about this idea of a theoretical versus practical approach, that has often been the bane of my existence. You know, when I was in corporate learning and develop environments, I was surrounded by people. Like I came in as an operator. I had been on the ops side. I had been the student in the classes. And it was a fascinating flip to come in because everyone else I was around was PhDs. They had spent their entire careers learning, in learning how to do adult learning theory. And when I came in and I was like, well, this is great, but they don't need an academic exercise because that taps into your number two about the cognitive overload. Like
Mm-hmm.
they don't want to come sit for 4 hours or 8 hours a day and walk out with a wonderful book by one of the many people that walk on stages all over the world, with their latest theory. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I love, Simon Sinek, Brene Brown, they have their place. But leaders are drowning today and they don't want an
Yep.
academic exercise. They don't want to do, 6 hours of critical thinking and then still walk out with no idea what to do next. To
Yep.
your point, like they it's not, I don't, and I think that's why it doesn't work. And the word that always came up and what I used to have leaders tell me all the time is they felt like so much development was performative. It
Yep.
was checking a box because somebody told you to go do this, but they knew that at the end of the day, no one was going to hold them accountable to anything that they learned. They just needed to sit there and do it and understanding it was going to actually make their workload heavier because they couldn't actually go do their job. Depending on the program that was created, I know some organizations like to do these development programs where then you have like projects that you do on top of your work. So it
Yep.
actually makes it even more stressful. So it's almost like it's a punitive thing to go try to develop.
Yep.
Uh, and so when I sit there and like that was your first, I said, I think that's where we get so much wrong is one, we don't actually know what development is needed. I agree with that. I think it's unfortunate because I think you have people who mean well. Like when we talk about HR, I was in HR when I led when I led a learning institute, I was an HR function, but I was also an oddity because I
Mhm.
immediately wanted to start pulling stats from all over the place that traditionally were never leveraged in creating learning strategy because
Yep.
it didn't fit the academic approach to how it had been done. And it was very
Yep.
hard. It was incredibly challenging. And again, I don't think it was malicious. I think that that's just the world that they understood and the world that they knew. But I also think that's why we never saw needles moving. We never
Yep.
saw anything shifting for the people who participated in our trainings is because I don't think we're solving their problem. And also, we were never actually holding them accountable to implementing anything that they learned. And I just don't think we probably engaged them in the right way. And I feel like to going back to your second point with the cognitive overload, we have to get really simple about what are
Yep.
we doing, why are we doing it, and how we want people to shift from where they are today to what they're going to do tomorrow. If we make
I
it too hard, they
100%
just
agree.
don't have the ability to do it.
Well, they can't even think about tomorrow because they're drowning today.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think I've done the neuroscience qualifications. I've got adult learning qualifications. I've done executive development programs, blah blah blah. And the majority of the stuff that we share now in our programs, I can explain. We have 42 of them now. 42 problems that we can solve, friction points that we can solve, and I can explain any of them to you in less than 5 minutes, and you'll get it. And it's built around a metaphor or a picture or a story, and you'll get it. And it's so it's almost commonsensically simple stuff.
Yeah.
And we use the phrase simple, not easy, because it's super simple to be a good leader. It's not easy.
Yeah.
You've just got to follow the steps. But to follow those steps sometimes takes a lot of grit, sometimes takes a lot of determination. And to your point, we're not holding them accountable for doing it, but also we're not holding them accountable. We're not helping them to overcome the belief system that they've grown up with. The perfect belief system would be the answer to a heavy workload is working harder and longer to get through it. Or if you work hard, you'll get ahead. We all have these beliefs ingrained into us. And so we've got to challenge those when people get to these leadership roles where working harder and longer is not the answer to good leadership. It's the fast route to burnout. But when you're teaching a leadership program that says, well, I know you're really busy right now, but we need you to go on this 4-day retreat, which then is followed up by a project. How are we undoing those beliefs that you've got to work harder and longer to get through this? And one of the things we do before Amplify is we say to one-up leaders, you need to create some space for your participant to come along so they can start to apply some of the things that we're doing. And we tell the one-up leaders, this is what your person is going through, and I want you to pay attention to that. I want you to notice some of those things, and they need to be unloaded a little bit to be able to try this new behavior. It's like trying to learn a new language. They're going to be a bit clunky at first, but you can't do that when you're overloaded. So there's so much that we're a systematic failure of leadership development, and also a lack of leadership development systems, I think, are what led us to where we are now. And it's such an opportunity area. It's such a land of opportunity to create positive change as we do this now.
Yeah, so one of the thoughts that I'm having, because I'm thinking about it a ton, is, again, clearly you have an international perspective, you have an international clientele. And I'm interested in your perspective on this. So one of the things we're seeing in the US right now, and there's quite a few studies and articles that have come out about it, is that younger generations are not wanting to go into leadership because they don't want that grind. They don't believe if I work harder, I'm going to get ahead. They don't believe if I just, commit 110%, somehow I'm going to get rewarded. Because they've seen the generations before them burn themselves out. And for what? Not very much.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's I think it was some article, and I can't remember where it was, but they were calling it kind of like a crisis of leadership, is that there's people who are not wanting to enter the pipeline at all. So,
Yep.
And I feel like that's probably relevant to the conversation we're having right now, is the expectations have continued to grow without any expectation of how are we teaching people to approach this differently? And also, what is a realistic breaking point of what people can actually accomplish successfully as a leader?
I had, you made me think of a conversation I had with a bank a couple of months ago where they were talking about this exact problem. Our Gen Z people don't want to get leadership roles, and they're just not as committed as we are, as middle agers. I still think of myself as a young whippersnapper, but clearly not anymore. They're just not as committed as I was. They don't want to work the extra hours. And there was kind of a vitriol against these people. And I said, well, maybe they've got their boundaries in better places than we have. And maybe they're smarter than we are because they're not being sucked in by the system. And let's face it, the first sign of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. And we see that working harder and longer isn't the answer, because it burns people out, because it exhausts people, because it makes people leave. And Gen Z have said, no, I'm not going to do that. I want to work for something where I clearly see the purpose of what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. I want great feedback to help me get better at doing it. And I want to own something. So leadership seems like a lot of admin, a lot of hard work. I'd rather go out and start my own thing where I own it, and I'm seeing the purpose of me making a difference in this world. That's far more interesting to them than just go and grind and do the paperwork and be an administrator. And leadership isn't sexy. If you teach management is not a sexy sport. Leadership's awesome. Management is not a sexy sport. So why would you sign up for a management job, which is just basically more headaches with more people and more work, just to get some more money?
Hey, quick announcement. I'm hosting a 3-day virtual leadership summit called Navigating Uncertainty from January 25th through 27th in 2026. 21 expert speakers are going to cover strategic leadership, team building, operational excellence, and leading through change. Best part? It's completely free if you watch live. However, if you want lifetime access to the replays and extra speaker resources, grab the All Access Pass for just $97. Head to the website in the show notes and register now. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. Well, and just so funny. So the reason why I find myself laughing is I'll never forget. Um, I knew this woman who she was a nurse. She was a bedside nurse, and she had promoted into her like first level supervisory role. And I had a conversation with her because she was incredibly unhappy. And the first thing she said to me is, if I'd have known what this is what it was, I would have never done it.
Hmm.
Right. And I think it comes back to what you're talking about is the management. We drown people in management and in a lot of repetitive tasks, which I do think there's a moment for technology to step in and help us a bit more with the mundane aspects of leadership. And again, I'm trying to be respectful and mindful that America is not the same as everybody else, and we might do some things that are a little different, for better, for worse. We do things some different sometimes, but this idea of I like that you said that leadership is actually pretty awesome. It's the management I think that drowns people.
Management's all about processes and numbers and KPIs and measuring and ensuring things happen. And honestly, we don't teach management very well either. So we're not really equipping people for success. Leadership is so much cooler than that. And that's why I like working in the leadership transition space, because you're moving from management into leadership, you're needing new skills and a new backpack of stuff. Um, but the reality is, when you get well, no, let me go back a step actually. The reality is more than 60% of managers are accidental managers or accidental leaders. They were the best salesperson, so they got promoted into sales manager, or they were the longest standing factory worker, so they became the shift leader. And then they're kind of given this new accolade, you're the manager now, go do, with very little support.
Yeah.
So then it's a trial and error exercise, which is really stressful. I can't afford to screw up, but I don't know what I'm doing. So I'll just try and wing it, and see what works and see what doesn't at the expense of my team's engagement and productivity. But also, I'll be really stressed out because I don't know what's important and what's not important because I've got no clarity from my boss. So I'll just try and do everything. And I'll also do the things I used to do when I was on the shop floor, whatever role that was, because I'm not sure if I'm allowed to let go of those or not. And then we go through this whole cost cutting exercise in our business and we need to lose a few people. So I'll just pick up that work as well. And then we wonder why people don't enjoy being managers. It's a crazy dynamic. And then we're like, would you like to be a leader? That's even more responsibility and complexity. And people are like, well, no. Why would I do that to myself? And that's what Gen Z are saying. I want to run a small agile team of 5 people. I don't want 500 people working for me. And I get it. I've done the same thing in my business. We went from me up to 13 people and back down to 4 because I didn't want the management stuff. I wanted to be doing this. I wanted to be engaging and working in businesses, not having lots of meetings with team performance catch-ups all the time. And I run a business that minimizes this as much as possible.
Yeah.
But when you've got a busy day job on top of doing that as well, it's too much. So we need to simplify it right down. And our methodology now is simplify to amplify. It's choose the 1 or 2 things that are going to make a really big difference, and everything else will just be dragged along by it. And that's what I think we're not teaching our leaders now is how can they work out what's really important to put their time and energy into, and everything else will come along. You don't need to focus everywhere all the time.
Well, and I used to say, like, the work is still going to be there. Like, you have to
Yeah.
figure out what's the most important thing in this moment. Again, which brings us to the fact that you are going to be having a session because I recognize this language and I'm very excited about it. That you have graciously agreed to be a speaker at the upcoming Navigating Uncertainty Leadership Summit. And you're going to have a session talking exactly about that. So do you want to talk about, so for somebody who wants to actually experience what you do and how you do it, can you tell a little bit about the session that you're going to have?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we see as the greatest points of friction for the majority of leaders is knowing where to put their time and energy. Because everything seems urgent, everything seems important. Their team's asking for things, their boss is asking for things, they've got a workload to do, they're also meant to be being a leader, and it can get really, really overwhelming. And a lot of people try to prioritize or they make checklists for themselves and they just work down the checklist without any real insight into what's going to shift the dial the most. And we talk about one of the fundamental differences between management and leadership being managers are there to get stuff done. Leaders are there to ensure the right things get done. And so it's a difference between productivity and efficiency. And so during the course of the session, I'll be taking people through a very, very simple framework called PVC, nice and easy to remember, polyvinyl chloride. But essentially, it helps people to work out, should I be involved in this or should we even be doing it? How does this compare to all the other things I could be doing in terms of the value of it? And do I actually have capacity to put this into my workload? And if I don't, what am I going to do about it? So it's almost like a series of three thinking gates that we work through that allows you to strip away some of the things you shouldn't be involved in. We're focusing on shifting beliefs here. So we're talking about, is this a you thing because you're holding onto it because of ego, or is this a you thing because actually you're the only person that can do it? If you're the only person that can do it, can we develop somebody else to get that skill set? And so we go kind of quite deep on offering some alternatives to the normal attitude, which is another thing's come along, I'll just slot that into my workload as well, and I'll work late tonight or I'll work the weekend to get it done. What we're need to pull back from that and say, well, where are the really important things? And we know that if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. And what we want is people to be focusing their energy on the 2, 3, 4 key activities each day that make the biggest difference. And what happens is that almost acts like a sort of fishing dragnet that when you've got 3 or 4 things that go really well, everything else comes with it. And so we're asking people to come along to that session and spend 60 minutes learning about what they can do to, when everything seems urgent and important, how can they rethink that a little bit differently? And we'll give you some very, very practical tools that you'll literally learn in the session and be able to apply and hopefully have some light bulb moments that will give you the insights that you need to make a genuine positive change. To put some context on it, during the course of our programs, our target is to give leaders back a minimum of 6, ideally 8 hours per week to work on the important stuff. This one framework, on average, gives people 2 to 3 hours per week back in their diaries to focus on the important stuff, just because they're starting to let go of some of the noise that they previously were involved in whacking moles, putting out fires, and juggling 65 balls at the same time. 2 to 3 hours gain for 1 hour investment. 2 to 3 hours per week gain for 1 hour investment. I think it's a good return on investment of your time.
I would agree. I actually am really excited to see your session. So for anybody who's interested, the registration link will be in the show notes. There is a live version of this. So if you hear this and you're after, because I think you're on Tuesday, the 27th.
Sounds
Um,
right. Yep.
there's 20 sessions in this summit, y'all, so I can't keep all of them. I'm pretty sure I know who's on what day, but don't ask me the time. But if you get this after Tuesday, there is a replay option. So still click the link, still check it out. I guarantee it is worth your time and effort. I'm really excited. I'm looking forward to your session. I can honestly tell you, I've already suggested several people specifically because I know who they are and I know some of their leadership struggles. And I've specifically said they need to come to your session because I think that there's a lot they're going to get from it. So I don't know anybody that couldn't benefit from this session. I will say there's not a single session or topic that I don't think is going to be really fun and interesting to entertain. So definitely check it out. And also, please check out Jimmy and the work he is doing with Simplify to Amplify, because I think that what you have created is a very unique program. I love that your perspective is very broad. I love that you are bringing so much value to people. And so for folks out there, if this is an area of struggle for you, if this is an area of struggle for your team, I highly, highly encourage you to go reach out to Jimmy, check him out, connect with him on LinkedIn, wherever it is. And also, he did not talk about this, but Jimmy has a book. He's an author. He's brilliant. So check out his resources. Um, I feel like you undersold yourself a little bit. So, I mean, I can throw a little bit out there for you, but please take advantage of this opportunity to go learn about who he is and the work he does. Because I'm definitely happy our paths have somehow crossed. I still don't know exactly how they crossed, but I'm so grateful that they did. And
The universe put our energies together. I think that's probably the vibe I'm going along with.
well, and but I'm grateful for it because I think that there's so much power in connection and bringing people together and just to your point, amplifying the work that everyone is doing. And there, I feel like we all have an ability to reach out and find the right people who need our solution. So thank you so much for being a part of this show, for being a part of the summit. And yeah, I'll see you in a couple days.
Yeah, I'm so excited about it. And honestly, some of the sessions look incredible. So just to echo Kim's point, I'm excited about my session, but there are also some incredible other speakers that definitely worth signing up, and it's free. So even better, come along and get 20 sessions of powerful leadership development on a variety of topics, which could be your development budget for the rest of the year. You can just absorb it all and watch it over the next 52 weeks. It'd be what a great plan. So thank you, Kim, for putting it together.
Thanks so much. All right. See you in a bit.